So now I think we will get underway, and thank you all again for joining us today. School buses carry more people than all other public transportation combined, 25 million children per day in the US. There are nearly 500,000 school buses on the road in the US, each of which you can picture as a small power plant on wheels, with the various fumes coming out of the tailpipe, just like they do with our power plants. Over 95% of the school buses on US roads are diesel. While school buses are the safest way to get kids to school, much safer than, for instance, driving in automobiles, most are diesel, and these are contributing to health problems, including asthma, which is now the #1 chronic health condition among US children. You will hear more about this from Dr. Sara Adar. Only within the last few years have electric school buses come on the market. And as of this year, the good news is all major manufacturers of school buses have at least one electric model available. Some have more. A new offering, they're currently 3 times the price of a new diesel, not having yet reached the cost benefits of large-scale production. As battery prices come down and production ramps up, this difference can be expected to reduce. To date, most of the electric school buses on the road, which number approximately up to 750 nationwide, have been as a result of the Volkswagen Dieselgate settlement funds allocated by state environmental agencies. This is definitely the case in the Midwest, where 30 or more now are on the road and have almost all been purchased in large part with VW trust fund dollars. These funds, which have a limited term, those funds needing to be spent within 10 years, ensure that it happens, have jump-started the transformation, but other funding is needed to ensure that the transformation of our school bus fleet happens in time to meet both health and climate goals. In case I didn't mention, diesel buses contribute both to health problems among children, but also to our climate crisis, given the black carbon and numerous pollutants coming out of those tailpipes. The Environmental Protection Agency's DERA program, the Diesel Emission Reduction Act program, is not aimed at school buses, although it certainly has helped with filters and alternative fuels historically, and it could be used to replace diesel school buses with zero-emission electric school buses, although that has been very rare, very rarely done in the past. Fortunately, bills now pending in Congress provide opportunities to increase investment in buses and technical assistance for schools and bus operators. These include the Clean Commute for Kids Act, Clean Rides for Kids, the American Jobs Plan, and now in the infrastructure bill, at least provisions of it. The bipartisan infrastructure bill does include dollars both for electric school and transit buses, although the negotiations are ongoing and the details, including the dollar amounts, are not final. Most US residents and community members haven't yet seen an electric school bus, despite numerous advantages these offer: cleaner air for kids who wait for and ride them, and for the communities through which they pass. Lower maintenance and operation costs, making a quieter, smoother experience for drivers and children so they arrive at school calmer and ready to learn, as well as the growing potential of vehicle to grid to provide revenue back to schools or offset the costs and or vehicle to building to serve as backup instead of diesel generators during community weather events and emergencies. While not yet the case in many places, it is likely that the total cost of ownership of electric school buses will be less than diesel. You will hear about the real-life, on-the-ground experiences of schools in Michigan already using electric buses, a few of which are testing vehicle to grid. As part of efforts to reduce carbon emissions and create equity across communities, electric school buses play an important part of transportation electrification through job creation in areas with historically underserved low-income neighborhoods and residents. You will hear from one manufacturer bringing those jobs to the Midwest. As diesel vehicles are a major contributor to our nation's air quality and resulting health problems, electric school buses can contribute to improving neighborhood air quality and will be popular with parents. You will hear from ELPC's Air Quality Monitoring Project Leader on the connection between citizen science and cleaning up our school bus fleet. And now I'd like to introduce our speakers, which I will do individually. We're starting off with Dr. Sara Adar. Sara is an epidemiologist with the School of Public Health at the University of Michigan and did the early first cutting edge research on school buses and the old school buses and their impact on children's health. Now I turn to Sara.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, you did a wonderful introduction. I was going to say, I'm Sara Adar. I'm an environmental epidemiologist. I've been studying the health effects of air pollution now for almost 25 years. And as Susan noted, one of the areas that I have investigated is about the health effects of diesel exhaust on kids riding school buses. And it's really that research that I want to share with you today. So we heard earlier in this webinar that approximately 25 million kids in the United States ride buses to school each day. And this is a very safe way to get kids to school from the perspective of the traffic accidents and injuries, as we heard. But using older school buses for transportation really means that our children may be experiencing high levels of diesel exhaust during their commutes. So research by my group and others have shown that the levels of harmful air pollution inside school buses can be up to 10 times higher than what you'd find in ambient air in the community, and twice as high as what you often find on surrounding roadways. Now, because of this, even relatively short commutes on older school buses can have very big impacts on kids' daily air pollution exposures. So why do we worry about this? Well, exposure to air pollution from traffic has been linked to a whole host of poor health outcomes in children, including inflammation, poor lung function, increased likelihood of developing asthma, and increased risk of asthma attacks. In fact, there's one really interesting and important study that was conducted in Southern California that showed that children growing up with higher exposures to traffic-related air pollution have slower lung growth than other children's. And they also showed that this reduction in lung development resulted in permanently smaller lungs throughout adulthood. Now, the good news is that there are solutions out there, and my colleagues and I have investigated the impacts of replacing older, highly polluting diesel buses with buses that had better clean air technologies and cleaner fuels on the exposures and health of bus riders. Now, as part of that study, we collected air samples on nearly 600 trips on close to 200 different school buses. And we also tested the health of almost 300 children who are riding those buses as they change their technologies from older technologies to newer technologies over a period of 4 years in the Seattle, Washington area. Now, what we found in that study was that buses with cleaner technologies and fuels had better air quality inside of the buses, and the children riding the buses had better health. The kids who we studied had less inflammation in their lungs, and they missed fewer days of school when they were riding cleaner buses. These improvements in health we found were strongest among the most susceptible children who had asthma. Now, given these results, we asked the question, what would happen if the entire fleet of school buses in the United States were cleaned up? When we did that extrapolation, we estimated that if all of the US cleaned up its school bus fleet, we would expect to see 14 million fewer absences among our school children across the United States each year. Now, this has obvious impacts on children's ability to learn and arguably their future earning potential, but it also impacts the productivity of parents who now no longer need to take as much time off of work. Now, there haven't been too many studies published in this area, but there are a couple of others, and they've reached very similar conclusions to our work. So there's one study in Georgia that was published in 2019 that showed that switching to cleaner school buses resulted in better educational performance on standardized tests and better lung health in physical education classes. Another study, which was also conducted in Washington State, demonstrated that school districts that switched from older diesels to cleaner buses had fewer hospitalizations for respiratory ailments in the general community after the switch. As economists, those authors further estimated that the ratio of economic value versus the costs of switching out the technology was between 7-1 and 14-1. Now, while all of this work suggests that school districts should replace their older school buses with newer and cleaner school buses, as we heard before, right, the price tag can be very steep, approximately, I think it's like $100,000 to $400,000 per bus. And as a result, many of the buses in the United States are on the road for upwards of 15 years before being decommissioned. Now, luckily, as we heard before, again, there's some funding from the government that's already been helpful in this area from the EPA under the Diesel Emission Reduction Act, or DERA. And I have a graduate student who's now conducting some very interesting research on their school bus rebate program. And what she's finding is that school districts that won funding from the EPA to purchase clean buses experienced a reduction in absenteeism among the school kids that was not observed in districts that did not win the funding. And these findings were for the entire United States. Very importantly, we're also observing that the funds from the EPA seem to be most impactful for replacing the oldest buses that we know are most highly polluting. Now, while all of this suggests that the funding is indeed effective, the current program is limited in size and scope, suggesting that additional support to help remove old and highly polluting buses from our school bus fleet would be highly beneficial to the health of our nation's school children. Importantly, such funding could also help to reduce known health disparities across our country, since lower income school districts are often harder pressed to find the funds to replace buses. In addition, lower income districts and districts with higher percentages of Hispanics and Black students also tend to experience higher pollution levels from other sources in their communities, and they often have more children with asthma that make them especially susceptible to the health effects of air pollution. So with that, I'll close, and I welcome any questions at the end.
Thank you, Sarah. Next, we turn to Dave Meeuwsen. Dave has just retired as the Transportation Director for Zeeland Public Schools in Michigan. Dave also has been very active with the Michigan Association of Pupil Transportation, and in both of those roles, he has been key to Michigan now having 17 electric school buses on the road. So we turn to Dave for some real life experience and advice relating to electric school buses. Dave?
Thank you, Susan. Appreciate it very much. And yes, recently retired from Zeeland Public Schools in Western Michigan, where we are on the real West Coast, nice sandy beaches, etc. And we have 4 electric diesel buses that we've had on the road since December of 2019. So right after the new year there, they were on regular routes every day. We've got just over 50,000 miles on our 4 electric buses. And that includes driving them for food runs and that kind of stuff during a year when school was cut a little bit short a year ago. So it's been interesting learning from the drivers and everybody else and folks who think about range anxiety and etc. So the 4 buses that Zeeland Public Schools has, we have 2 on a pretty long route, and 2 of them on shorter routes. The longer ones get into the rural areas and the country some, and the shorter ones stay closer to town on all paved roads. And the drivers, when they have a half a day, we're kind of worried that the 2 longer routes might not have enough time to get a little bit of juice in the middle of the day. So the 2 longer runs at 9 o'clock, they're done in the morning, they plug in, they get enough juice during the middle of the day that they can easily do the afternoons again. When there's a half day, they were concerned. I had a concern, wasn't quite sure how to address it. And a couple of days before the first half day, the drivers came to me and said, "Hey, can we swap buses?" And I kind of looked at them and I says, "What?" Yes. The 2 people with shorter run routes said, "We would like the people with the 2 longer routes to use ours at noon. And that way we can use theirs and we stay closer and allow it work." That's how much the drivers appreciate the electric bus. They didn't want to not be able to use them on the half days. And they came to me with the creative solution on how to continue using them even on half days. So that's there's concern about range anxiety. We have not had issues with our buses on the range on normal type days. Like I mentioned, they plug in a little bit, the longer ones, and the other ones are there. 90% of all of our routes we can easily do with the current buses that we have. And we could add 1 more battery pack to our buses and they'd probably take care of 100% of all of our routes. As technology changes and batteries become better, the ranges will even get longer. And so I think even in time of using electric buses to go from Zeeland to the state capitol in Lansing to do field trips to the historical museum and things like that will become a reality. Right now, if we do that, we do need to find a place to plug in to come back home. But I think things will change as you go. Some really interesting things. So Michigan Association of Pupil Transportation worked with a number of different districts. We put a committee together and it started with environmental law practices, and Susan kind of raised the question back in 2017. And it took us from 2017 until December 2019 to actually have buses in our fleet. But we wrote a grant because of the mistakes of our friends at VW and the funds that were available to help offset the cost. And for folks in Michigan, if you wanted to be part of the grant, you had to come up with $100,000, which is kind of a normal cost for a bus. And we would use the grant money to cover the other 2/3 of the costs. And it worked very well. We have 17 buses in the state now that we are using, and everybody's been using them this spring and look forward to using them again in the fall. And it's a kind of a combination. We have Lion electric buses and we have buses from Thomas built buses out of North Carolina. And the ones from Thomas are quick charge, fast charge type stuff. And the ones from Lion are more slow charge. And both types of technologies we're evaluating and having the chance to work through, and both seem to be working just fine for us. Some interesting stats and costs with prices of fuel, et cetera, starting to rise. Before the fuel prices were rising, it was costing us approximately 45 cents a mile to run down the road with diesel buses, 32, 31 cents a mile for propane buses, because we do have a variety in our fleet. We've got propane, diesel, gas, and now we also have electric. And we were able to figure out that it's costing us only 17 cents a mile to run our buses down the road that are electric. So that's quite a difference in fuel savings, and our electric prices are still the same today. They didn't go up. We're paying 9 cents a kilowatt hour, but diesel fuel prices have gone up $1.50 per gallon in the last 90 days, and it doesn't appear that it's going to slow down anytime soon. So those prices continue to get higher, and the operating costs of running diesels, just regular operations, cost more. There's more oil to drain. There's no oil to drain on electric buses. There's more filters, fuel filters, etc., transmission filters. There's like 300 plus moving parts in a combustion type motor, where we only have 30 some moving parts in our electric vehicles. So there's some real contrast there and some things to think about. The drivers themselves didn't have any real issues. We spent a little time training. And the thing of it is it's kind of interesting. The Lion buses have a regeneration part to it. And by the last day of school, I received a picture from one of the drivers of the electric buses saying, "It took me a while, but look at, I have this much electricity left in my battery compared to when I first began my route." She said, "It's never been better than that." So those drivers are competing against each other to see who can use the least amount of energy and their cost per mile, et cetera. So there's some really cool things happening in that department of our drivers, where they're trying to do better. Given the chance to do that, they've taken the initiative to say, "Hey, I think I can get more miles on a charge than you can," and some things like that. So it's been some pretty awesome things with that. Real interesting information from parents in our community. The community input and feedback that we're getting is just awesome. People are like, "Wow, when are we going with electric buses on more of the routes? They're quiet. The kids are more ready to learn when they get into school in the morning because it's a much quieter ride. And the buses have plenty of giddy up and go." All right. And we're in Michigan, so we get over 100 to 150 inches of snow, and we have been driving in all different types of road conditions, and driving in the snow hasn't slowed them down. The weight in the buses and the batteries have actually increased the traction for the drivers in the snow, and there's been some real positives with that as well. So always available for questions, and Susan has my data, and always willing to talk to folks. Have done a lot of different webinars with a lot of different states and their Department of Environmental Quality folks, and Eagle in Michigan was very vital in helping us to secure the additional funds so that we could put our grant together and put electric buses in Michigan.
Thank you, Dave. Dave has amazing on-the-ground experience, as you can tell from his remarks, both in Zeeland and with his school partners with Michigan Association of Pupil Transportation across the state. Thanks so much, Dave. Next, we turn to Orville Thomas. Orville represents, he's the Director of Government Relations for Lion Electric, which is the company that has the earliest electric school buses in number across North America. Based in Canada, but happily for those of us in the Midwest, with a recent announcement of building the first and largest all-electric heavy and medium duty vehicle manufacturing facility in Illinois. We turn now to Orville Thomas.
Yeah, thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Susan. I want to especially thank our congressional staffers. I realize how busy you are, mostly because it's hard to get you to return my phone calls. I think I'm just joking. Sorry if no one found that funny. We definitely appreciate all the work that you're doing to putting in and passing our infrastructure package that hopefully transforms the way we travel and the fuels that we use when we're out on our road. So as Susan said, my name's Orville Thomas. I'm the new-ish Director of Government Relations at Lion Electric. Probably new to all of you. I have the honor of being the first Director of Government Relations for Lion, starting in April, after having served in several different transportation and health equity capacities in California. I've worked for previous Governor of California, Jerry Brown, on projects like high-speed rail and looking at how we pay for our infrastructure in California through the gas tax, and also had the chance to work with his administration as the Deputy Director of Public Affairs for the California Department of Public Health before then taking a job as the Director of Government Relations for the California Immigrant Policy Center. So why I wanted to join Lion, and it was a tough choice to leave health equity, was because it's an opportunity to be the first, and especially the first government relations director for a manufacturer that is international, but wanting to invest heavily in the United States, especially the Midwest, in clean tech jobs and in zero emission vehicle manufacturing for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And these are the vehicles that are disproportionately emitting emissions way more than the population of the vehicles are out on the road. So it really makes sense, if we're thinking of climate change as this existential crisis, that we want to tackle these medium and heavy duty vehicles. And it gives me also a chance to lobby for good. It gives me a chance to lobby for something I care deeply about, that I've worked with in the past, and work for a company that really started with this mission of having clean school buses and making sure that our communities and the kids that are riding those buses and the drivers that are in the buses all day are not breathing the emissions that unfortunately traditional legacy school buses have continued to spew out into our areas. So Lion is investing heavily in the United States, especially in the Midwest, because we see where there is opportunity and potential. We know that the Midwest has a strong history of vehicle manufacturing. We know that the workforce is ready for this transition into manufacturing of clean tech. And we know that the jobs are going to really create this huge opportunity for change throughout the country, and starting right in the middle of the country. And we'll be opening a brand new manufacturing facility, as Susan said, almost 1 million square feet. It will be the largest all-electric manufacturing facility of medium and heavy duty vehicles. We're proud to call Joliet, Illinois, our new home. And when we are kind of up and running next year, we're going to be able to produce 20,000 all-electric medium and heavy duty vehicles off our line annually. And just think about that. These are 3 types of buses. These are all-electric medium and heavy duty vehicles, like class 6 through class 8 tractor trucks. So it's those middle mile delivery trucks that we see. We have a nice contract with Amazon to provide them with 2,500 trucks that will deliver the goods from one distribution center to another, so about 100 to 200 miles. And then, as Susan talked about, we have almost 400 fully electric school buses in operation right now throughout the country and in Canada. So we want to build off of that success and allow every community in the country to experience all electric school buses. We're going to have all electric garbage trucks pretty soon, so keep track there. If you're waking up early because your city runs the garbage at 5 or 6 in the morning, and you happen to live close to your alleyways or right by the street on your window, we're going to have an all electric garbage truck in operation, hopefully by 2022. It's going to be fun to see how quiet it is and what that allows cities to do in terms of running their resources. We'll have all electric utility trucks. So think of those bucket trucks that are lifting people up and down the line so that they could fix, any energy grid that goes down. And we're going to have all electric ambulances. So really excited to see where Lion is going to go in the next couple of years, and what we as a community can do to make sure that more fleets are transitioning. And why are we investing? We're investing because as more states and the federal government looks to transition to all electric, manufacturers like Lion have greater certainty on orders. And what that does is it allows us to invest more in our research development and make our parts at a scale that allows the price to go down, because we know that the selling opportunities will go up. And in that sense, really happy to share with the group that Lion just broke ground on a battery manufacturing plant, that Lion will be able to make our own batteries. And that's going to be in Quebec, but it's going to add to the Biden administration's goal of having, a North American pipeline and a supply chain for batteries. So we could start reusing some of our batteries. We could start looking into recycling. We can make the batteries that go into our own vehicles, and we could develop the material resources that are necessary to lessen our dependence, on foreign parties, and making sure that we grow a new industry in America and in North America with Canada. And so as Lion and other manufacturers continue to grow, and we get this experience and we get the market to grow with us in terms of wanting to buy more all electric vehicles, you'll see these milestones start to get hit. Our battery manufacturing will get better, so the range will get longer. As Susan touched on, and as Dave has talked about, range anxiety really doesn't need to be one of those things in this medium and heavy duty fleet, because the fleets are targeted for a very coordinated route. If you're thinking of school buses, school buses have a very fixed route. They're not going off course at all. And about 90% of them are doing less than 80 miles a day. If you want to hear about Lion's buses, we work with the school district and we give them the battery package that is best for them. So they get to see where they fit, but we have battery packs that go essentially from 100 miles to a max range of about 155 miles. We have heard from our partners that it's more than enough to do a daily run, and it's more than enough for them to do multiple daily runs throughout the week before having to go and start charging their vehicles. And when they do charge, we have the machinery and we have the technology available so that they can charge on off hours, off peak, and they can make sure that they're working with their local utilities to get the cheapest rates, as Dave had talked about for his rates, but also be in a position where if they are looked at as little batteries, they would be able to sell some of the energy back to the grid or back to local communities on peak hours, so that then they can make some money off of their vehicles that are just sitting in their fleet lot. I think one of the most important parts for all of you here, and I think why we wanted to have you here, is because we want to talk about funding. It's important because the funding programs are still being developed that help fleets like Dave and his fleet transition to fully electric vehicles. Right now we are seeing most fleets have a mix and match of electric, diesel, propane, but we want to work with the administration to achieve their goal of 100% all electric school buses throughout the country. As Susan noted, most of the funding that states get is coming from the malfeasance that we saw from Volkswagen. And we're seeing some of that Volkswagen funding go out for grants, but it's on a state-by-state basis. And we really need something better than that. Some states, like California, do allocate funding for zero emission vehicles and zero emission vehicle infrastructure in their general fund budget. But what we really need is for the federal government to make a transformational investment in this infrastructure, in zero emission vehicles, to provide that foundation that would help states and school districts fund the next generation of purchases and electric school buses. We want to do this and we want to be great partners, and we are doing this because we look at the Midwest especially as the big epicenter of zero emission vehicle manufacturing. When we went to Joliet, we made that investment in that community. We did so knowing that those 20,000 vehicles that come off the line will be going back into Midwestern communities. We want to make sure that the parents that are going to be making these vehicles in our Joliet facility are making the vehicles for their kids that are going to be riding school buses throughout the Midwest. We know that those dollars that happen from great wages in workers will have a ripple effect throughout the states that surround Illinois. We know that we can help start like a supply chain growth that are going to be in that area. We know that we're going to see technological advancements. We know that we're going to work with public institutions like Sara's in Michigan that really help us look at what the next generation is going to be of electric vehicles. But we could only do that if we see a foundational investment in electric vehicles. And so we're asking, me especially, all of you to keep working hard and, helping us out at the Capitol Hill level. But, we're all here for answering questions because I think we all believe that zero emission vehicle transitions, especially in our electric school buses, is going to be the best for the community and the best way that we can move forward in an equitable fashion.
Thank you, Orville. Orville's got great experience at different state levels, as you could hear, across California and now at Lion, and can speak well and has about the possibilities for jobs in the Midwest and the impacts across the country from bringing clean electric school buses and other electric vehicles to our communities. Next, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Tiffany Werner. Tiffany runs ELPC's air quality monitoring project and is a parent of a school-age school bus riding child. Tiffany?
Thank you, Susan, and thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Tiffany Werner. As mentioned, I'm the Community Science Organizer for the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and I'm here today to support the push for electric school buses. I would like to take a minute to thank everyone who's spoken on this call already today, and really kind of have everyone take a second to think about the words that Dr. Sara Adar was saying earlier about the health impacts of children, of switching over to electric buses and how that will benefit children. I'm the parent of a CPS student, so Chicago Public Kids student, or Chicago Public School student, who rides the bus to and from school every day. And he, like nearly half of the other students that ride the bus, is a diverse learner who is differently abled. So in the morning, every day, we hear the bus coming down the street. It is very loud and very clunky, and we head out. My son uses a mobility cane to help him walk. And so there are days where it can take him upwards of 7 minutes to get from our door to the school bus, because he has to slowly navigate to the bus, walk up the stairs, and get to his seat before the bus can then take off. It takes him even longer if he's having a sensitive sensory day, because he tries to navigate to the bus while holding his cane and all of his school belongings, and also cover his ears to not hear the bus. And so all of this time, the bus sits and idles in the street, and traffic builds up behind the bus as well. And I, a nervous parent, sits there and waves at the bus the entire time this is happening, and continue to wave until the bus gets down the street, and am left, usually most days, in a plume of exhaust smoke from the bus and everything behind it. Once he arrives at school, all the children must wait for him to, or must wait for all of the students to exit the bus. And my son exits last because it takes him the longest, meaning all the other children are sitting, waiting next to an idling bus before they can enter the school. The bus then leaves to go do more pickups and drop-offs. So I'm sure this process kind of continues at other schools and locations as well. Most parents like me, who are waving in the fumes and waiting for their kids to kind of be out of sight, understand that these old dirty buses are no good for our children, especially the more vulnerable children like my son. But I, unlike most parents, have the benefit of knowing how bad the pollution from these buses can be. At ELPC, I manage our community science program, where we provide handheld air quality monitors to communities with air quality concerns. In the years of doing this program, we have noticed that traffic and idling from larger diesel vehicles, such as trucks and buses from both the CTA, but also school buses, tend to be the biggest contributors to PM 2.5 spikes that community members tend to record and observe while out monitoring. And I have used the monitors to measure particulate matter outside my home during pickup, as well as tailpipe emissions in front of schools during afternoon pickup, and have noticed high PM spikes that can even last much longer after the bus leaves. A switch to electric school buses would greatly benefit our communities and our children. It would mean that students who ride the bus would no longer be subject to particulate matter pollution on their way to school, nor would they be subject to prolonged exposure while waiting on their classmates to safely exit the bus. Students could enjoy clean, quiet rides to school, which would allow them to have a better way to start the full day of learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany, for that real life daily experience, and how moving to electric school buses can impact children and their parents' lives. Now we're going to stop the recording and turn